Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Over Sharon show. Brandon is the host, and I'm co-host. I just had to say that.
No, we're both co-hosts. How dare you? Your name's on the show. What do you mean?
I'm the co-host.
We're both co-hosts.
Okay, we're both co-hosts. So today we're swapping a little bit. I'm going to read the quote, and Brandon has already pulled a card, but we are going to read the quote first. So it's from a book that I'm reading right now called The Jesus Code that I got on Amazon Kindle like a couple weeks ago. And I've just kind of been reading here and there. And so I thought this quote was really cool. So I'm going to read it. It's called A Meditation. Who am I? I ask the question and listen to the voice deep within. I am the only presence there is, infinite, omnipresent. I am yourself, the only self there is. There is no other. But I feel there are two of us, a me and a you, a lower and higher mind, a helpless creature and a divine master. A wave cannot be separated from the ocean, a ray from the sun. There is only me, universal and individual. Return to that glory that was once yours. One mind, one presence, one power. I am your spirit. You are the awareness of myself through which I function to reveal fulfillment in every area of life. I am now aware of the I mighty in the midst of me, my one self expressing as perfect life and perfect world. I renounce the false belief that I am a human being and accept the truth that I am pure spirit expressing as soul and body. God is my only being, my only existence. I am not a human mind, for there is only one mind, God mind, and God did not create anything opposite of itself. I am conscious of my only self, the truth of my being. I am aware of me, the only one, and through this awareness of myself, the kingdom flows into perfect form and experience. I am as Jesus, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. I am a complete being.
And that's a meditation that was in the book.
Yeah.
Something.
It was really close to the beginning of the book, like several pages in. I'm not very far into it because I'm just like reading it and I'm just like taking it all in. Like I'm just reading it very carefully, very slowly.
Right. I don't think we have to say much about the quote because we're going to cover a lot of it in the episode.
Okay.
If you know what I'm saying. Great quote though. I'm glad that you sent it. And yeah. So the card that I pulled is the Queen of Wands, and very synchronistic because I just got back from a trip where I took my two kitties that look just like this cat.
Kitties.
They're actually very dark brown because there's no such thing as a black cat. They're just real dark brown. Look at them in the sunlight. Anyway, so the Queen of Wands. I think it's a really good card for this episode because it's a good way to approach it. We're going to be in the fire, right? Because we're going to be creating with this episode. It's a creation, and we're going to be shedding light on a lot of different topics that people might not be aware of or that are a little hard to talk about. And how are we going to approach it? We're going to approach it with a feminine aspect, with intuition. So it's going to be the fire still, but it's going to be the softer side of it. It's going to be the healing side of the fire, the feminine, the intuition, the spark within.
Creativity. Absolutely. So to begin this whole topic, I wanted to ask Brandon about the last episode that we did. He was talking about the ego, and I just wanted some more clarification on his perspective of the ego and how it can be a good thing to have as well. I suppose maybe if you can also give a description maybe of what like Carl Jung would say was the ego and what you think about it in regards to how and why we need it. And how we need to use it, that would be helpful.
Yeah. Well, I think that what go needs to be used. Okay, I just want to check the notes really quick. Well, I want to start just by saying how when people get into spirituality, a lot of times, and they come in through the New Age movement, they talk a lot about destroying the ego and getting past the ego, and like you have to dissolve or eliminate the ego. And I think that they have a good point, because there is some truth in there, because the way our society functions compared to like society like in Tibet or something, where Buddhism is their main religion, you know, like out in Christianity over here is ours in this part of the world, this part of the realm. But so I think because people here are so stuck in this ego frame of mind, that when they come out of it, it's like a blessing to them. And so they are like, oh my God, they're right. They must be right, because they're experiencing all this joy in their life and all this different perspective and the way of seeing the world. And there's a lot of bliss that goes along with that. But after a while, that bliss can fade, or it just becomes another religion, because it's kind of a control system, which we'll get into. But I guess I can also back up a little bit. But that's why I feel that so many people that get into spirituality, when they hear me talk about the ego not being a bad thing, they're just like, what? And they kind of raise their eyebrows. I think it's that perspective, that point of view is what leads people to demonize the ego. And then when we say ego, what I'm talking about is it's the part of, like you were saying in that quote, where there's a you and an I. It's that distinction between self, like and other people, or even from yourself. Sometimes people disassociate from themselves, but I think really what it is, it's just a defense mechanism. I think that, and other people have talked about this too, and this is where I got it from, and maybe even Jung a little bit, and I know Michael Tessarion for sure talked about this, but it's that people were probably more like animals at some time, where it was just a single consciousness, if you will, like, and there wasn't really a division like there is today with people. And this is great, because we're talking about division in this episode. So people are really more of one mind, kind of like animals are. Like if you see a flock of birds, like we'll probably talk about later, or whatever it is, they just act instinctually. They're basically all of an instinct. And what happened with people is, I mean, nobody exactly knows, but a lot of people say, like Jung, like we were saying, they think that maybe there's some kind of mass trauma that happened somewhere along the way, and people are just knocked out of this way of seeing as a defense mechanism. Like, and it's not even that it's a bad thing. It could just be like the next step in the consciousness evolution, if you will, of our species. We had to rise up. And I'm not like into evolution or anything, obviously. I'm not saying we were like apes, but we could have been in our current form, and we could have just had a different way of being. You know, we see these like beautiful buildings everywhere that we can never replicate today. What if the way we were living in accordance with nature, kind of like hunter-gatherers do, but just at a different level, and we were able to access powers in our mind and in this realm that we don't even know exist, that are possible? What if that was that could have been called the golden age that people talk about? You know, you hear that in different like Hinduism and stuff like that. And I think we're just at a different age of consciousness, and that's what a lot of these people say. Maybe there was this mass trauma event that happened. You know, like sometimes people talk about like these cataclysms that happen, and the people who survived it, no matter what kind of, you know, catastrophe it could have been. Maybe it was the flood, right? Maybe it was Noah's Ark. The people who survived allegedly, yeah. Or maybe that's just because, well, the flood story is in so many other cultures and religions and everything. There's a flood story, so maybe it has to do with that, whatever. But the people who survived, I think there's two people. There's the chosen people, quote unquote, or whatever, the people that carried on the Hermeticism and stuff like that. And then there was other people who survived in the wild. And to survive in the wild, or in a time when it's like really crazy, you know, you need some kind of other way of being, other way of thinking, if there's dangers out in the world and all this stuff. So maybe that's what happened. There's some kind of defense mechanism that sprang forth. And now we have this kind of split where we could do what needs to be done. And even if they're bad things or whatever, you know, like sometimes you have to attack people or whatever. You have to, or you have to defend people if they're coming to attack you or whatever it is, you know, these terrible things that people had to go through. So it's split, kind of like when someone goes through childhood trauma and then later they have all these issues. Like that's a really hard example of it, whatever. But say that's what happened. And so now you have this yin and yang, this black and white, whereas before maybe it was just all gray. And so we have a split, a separation, just like in that quote with the wave, you know, you have the push and the pull, the up and the down. So I think that's what the ego is. The ego would be the quote unquote dark side of that, right? Well, it's weird. It's hard to say because then people say the shadow self and all that stuff. But I mean, the ego would be, as people are viewing it, because they're viewing it like it's something that's bad. So it would be the quote unquote bad. So that's why I meant dark. And then you have the intuition, which would be the light. And that's kind of like the all good. Everything's just good. Kind of like you see in, what's that movie? With the Skepsies, you probably won't know it. Why did I bring it up? No. I'm not going to even know. Oh, the Dark Crystal. There are these two different beings. I forget. There's a Skepsies and the other one. I've only seen the original one, like when it came out in the 80s, guys. So forgive me. I'm pulling this all from that when I was like 6. Anyway, but at the end they have there, and like there's the ones that are like dark and they're black and they're evil and they're always like, you know, scheming and plotting and they're like hunched over with big noses. You know what I mean? And then there's the other guys that are like all the light, but at the end they have to come together. And I feel like the ego is kind of some kind of representation of that. And the reason why I say it's not bad is because the realm that we exist in right now it's a tool that could be used, because if you go along with the new age, you know, everything's just fine. And ultimately that this is even the worst of the trusted plan. This is like trusting someone else's plan, not God's plan. But it's like, you know, I don't have to do anything. Everything will just come to me. It'll be fine. I just got to sit here and meditate all day and the world's perfect. Again, in the negative way, because we can always argue how the world is perfect. But it's that really trap, really at the end of the day, it's ultimately a trap of getting people stuck in non-action and to just not do anything. So I think that for action, the ego is a good tool, especially if you want to start doing work on yourself, in the realm of around other people, when you're like start to establish boundaries and stuff like that, or if you have to assert your God-given rights, like if somebody's telling you that you can't show your smiling face in a place, it might be a good tool. You know, I'm not saying to overuse it. It's just like a weapon, for example, you know,
a tool, just like everything else.
Yeah. Some people say that you don't need any weapons. And I would say, well, maybe in some kind of perfect society, Garden of Eden thing, but then what if people come from the outside, you know? So it's
right.
It's
and we're going to touch on that topic a little bit too.
Yeah. So it would be like filed under the realm of a necessary evil, but I don't even think it's an evil thing, because to call it evil is just externalizing it. And then
that's why good and evil are not good terminologies for what we're talking about.
Yeah. And what you're doing is it's like you're calling your left foot bad, you know, it's part of you. Mm-hmm. And again, like I said, in the society, a lot of people let it run their lives. I was like that. So it's like, it's more about getting it in check and getting a balance and using it when it's appropriate, or maybe it won't ever be appropriate if you're lucky. You never know. But I'm saying, you know, it's more about that. Because if you try to kill it or eradicate it, it's just like trying to chop your foot off, you know?
Yeah.
If your foot's swollen, then you get it looked at. But anyway, I think you get it.
Yeah. So what you were talking about with the whole gray area and not, not the black and white type of perspective. Something you said made me think of that book I'm reading, The Jesus Code. And I think you would like it because I feel like it's going in that direction. So it's kind of a sync for you to say those things, because it was triggering my memory of just what I was recently reading, which I think came after that quote, which was good. So,
well, I do look like Jesus. It's like the concept of the Gray Jedi. We talked about that in the movie
yeah,
episode. Same kind of thing where you're not just pure evil or just pure light. You're in the mix. You're existing in the reality. You see it for what it is, and you're just reacting to it in real time. You're not trying to put a label on it or anything or change it in a way. You're not trying to change it because you think there's something wrong with it. You're just trying to change yourself in the midst of it to make it better, if it can be made better. Allegedly.
yeah. So, this whole topic that we're talking about came up because we had listened to that episode on the Bushmen, Crow episode 385, the Kalahari Bushmen, and they had these concepts, and they, for example, have no concept of a hero, and they don't praise and they don't worship anything. And they're always bashing the ego so that someone's ego doesn't get too built up. And as Brandon and I were talking about this, it seemed like potentially not having enough ego, because they were always bashing it, potentially contributed to their demise. And Brandon can speak to the fact that they couldn't potentially put themselves into other people's shoes, in order to see the perspective of the people who were coming to take them into resettlement camps, right? And so they ended up succumbing to the tyranny. They were too docile. They didn't have boundaries, right? They were too innocent, too naive to think that, oh, these people are going to take us and enslave us. They were not prepared for that. So it kind of messed up their situation. And then because they didn't know to be prepared for such things, they weren't ready to say, you know what, if something like this happens, we need to be vigilant and ensure that even if they do try to push us off our land or whatever they try to do, that we're still going to maintain our methods and our ways to hunt and gather food for ourselves, because they're going to try to offer us food that isn't real food. They're going to try to tell us that there's a such thing as money, that we need this money in order to trade and buy things from people. When we know how to live, we can gather from the desert. We know what to eat. We know all these things. Who knows? But anyway, Brandon.
Well, I do want to first say that the way that this realm works and people in their situation, it's not like we're blaming them. We're not saying, oh, these freaking idiot retard. I understand how they get outpaced, and we're going to get into this more with different concepts, but yeah, it's not like we're like, oh, all these people, but we do always look at exactly what happens. And, we're just going to use this as an example, but yeah, I feel like what happens, they can't really, so their perspective on the world, when you have a perspective, especially a limited one, because that's kind of what they have on our world. They have a very limited perspective, right, on the world, not on nature. They have a great perspective. They see everything in nature, but in the world which we exist, Babylon, they have a very thin perspective. So, just like a child, or sometimes, like when I was in the car business, you'd see some people kind of get ripped off, right? Not me. We were pretty fair, but sometimes people get really ripped off, and they're just kind of, they go, you see someone walk into a car dealership, it's like a little old lady, or, well, no, those people are pretty good. Say it's a young girl and she doesn't really know a lot, and she just meets a salesman. She's like, oh, what a nice guy, and he reminds me of this, and I trust him totally. And why would he ever rip me off? It's that whole same thing. So the people in that culture, they might see the world as bad, or they might not agree with the way that other people live, but they might not be able to imagine what advantage somebody else would have, or what desire somebody else would have to get them off the land because they need that land, or maybe because they're hindering their cattle production, whatever. They might think it's for the good of everybody. They have no concept of, I don't want to speak for all of them, but obviously, but it's possible they could have no concept that there could be any kind of ill manner in that way, because they didn't even really have a concept of land ownership.
No.
And when people say that, it's not like they, because I used to think it's like when they'd say, oh, the Native Americans or Indians or whatever, they had no concept of land ownership. I would just be like, oh, that must mean that they disagree with the settlers. It's like, no, they just don't even understand what the fuck you mean when you're like, what do you mean you own the land? Like, you're going to be dead. You're going to take it with you, like,
Yeah.
so they just couldn't grasp it. It was like, it's like if if like you just held up a Tide Pod and you're like, I'm going to eat this, Brandon. I'd be like, what the fuck is, like I would have, it's the same thing. So because of their lack of ego and lack of any kind of darkness or ill will in their camp or in their society or a little cell group of men and women, they
People's good.
yeah, no, I know, I just want to say that. I like to say men and women, they just couldn't even perceive it. So it could have been that their way of living, they were just living too in harmony with nature and getting too close to this, whatever the hell it is, Babylon. They just got sucked right into it. There's, and you start giving people money and alcohol and, sugar. It's like corn syrup. Some people are going to be weak, they're going to fall into it. And I think that's what happens. They just kind of got turned in.
Yeah. And another thing that I meant to mention was that they were talking about in this episode that these Bushmen live in the present moment and they see things as whatever will be, will be. So they have full faith in what nature does. And that's good. But again, like Brandon was saying, that if you don't have this awareness of the other side of the story or what potentially could be coming against you, then you can easily be thrown off guard. But
well, it's the same thing as the New Age trap, because they're just thinking to themselves, oh, whatever will be, so we'll just go along with these guys. But maybe if they felt if they trusted more their instinct, where it's like, I don't like this, then that's, or if they got angry, that would be the spark of them to disagree with it and go against it and trust themselves and set that boundary by saying no, and then just finding another place in the Kalahari Desert to go live.
Right. And that goes to like the intuition that potentially animals have, because they were also mentioning this in that episode, that animals are connected to source. So and Bill Donahue mentioned it one time, and he said something about, that the animals were listening to their pineal glands, or that they were functioning with it. I don't know if animals have pineal glands, but it
How dare you?
definitely breaks down to intuition. The animals have an innate intuition that they follow when they're meant to go. When birds are meant to fly south, they know what to do. But yeah, Brandon, you had a thought about domesticated animals and pack animals. So what were your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think, like I was saying earlier, with something happen and human beings their consciousness split, and maybe it was just an upgrade. Like I said, it's like the next step. So now we no longer just go with our intuition, right? We can talk ourselves into things. We can convince ourselves that we're wrong. And animals don't have that. They just do in the moment what they think is the right thing to do, or whatever their intuition tells them, whatever their dog sense or whatever it is. They just
innate knowing.
in
Yeah.
their innate knowing, just like the birds. They don't all, I mean, it's possible they communicate in a way with each other, but I think they are connected as one. They're more of their consciousness is like as one when they're together. That's why they turn and everything. It's the same way. And it does have to do, I feel, my opinion is with their intuition, because they're just tuned in. That, and then I was saying how some animals might display different behavior, and this could be like domesticated animals, because domesticated animals are put through trauma, right? They're put through training, and then they might react against their intuition. Like some dogs or whatever, they'll attack people at command, or they might put themselves in peril. Now, some dogs do that to actually save people. I'm not trying to say that, that might be their instinct to save somebody. Even wild animals, I think, have been known to do that, save people, so I think there is something to be said for that part of it. But when it's more like a drug dog or something, like sniff these, the dog's like, I don't want to fucking do this, right? I'm not a rat, I'm a dog. So I think that's the only place where it could be seen that it's different. Or maybe some animals that have went through trauma through other ways, because there could be wild animals that get trained, like raccoons, for example. Like when I was camping in Savannah, all these raccoons came out like on the third night. It was crazy. And it's because of some kind of trauma, because they're next to people and they just get trained to eat the easy food. So it's not an active trauma like they're getting beat. It's more like a corn syrup and porno situation. It's like it's easier to do it. It tastes better. So they're just they become trained that way to go kind of against their instinct, or maybe their instinct is to get the easy food. But I think that's really the only place that it could be shown. Or I mean, that's one place where it could be shown that it's not just all intuition. And it's interesting because as I was saying the trauma aspect of it, I linked those together. We didn't even think about that earlier.
Yeah, because you said they were trained via trauma.
Yeah, and it's not always like it's a bad thing. Like the word trauma doesn't just mean, in this context, it doesn't mean like a terrible thing. It's just like they could have been withheld food, or they could have got treats, like I said.
Right.
It's just
right.
Yeah.
Kind of like, like corn syrup and sugar and, and white bread.
And being spanked, like a kid, and same thing.
Yeah.
So I think through trauma, your intuition could be overcame by your ego.
Is that light too bright on the side? Sorry, I had to turn the light on.
No, I think you're all right. You're a little darker, but darkness.
So and then you mentioned something about like you had some epiphany about the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and maybe that's where the ego came in. What are your thoughts about that?
I think the tree, good call on that one. I think that I just want to say, Sharon, you're an awesome co-host with me here, because I sometimes always forget to look at my notes or go off topic, and she just prods me right, and it's great. It's what I need. Makes the show great. I just wanted to say that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so I think that's a good story. It could be a good allegory. Maybe it did happen. I'm not making claims about Adam and Eve, but that could have been the point. Because if you think about the Garden of Eden, they have everything they need. Well, what's that? That's like the Bushmen kind of, right? So say the Bushmen, they're just living more like animals in accordance with nature. Technically, they don't take more than they need. They're smashing the ego all the time. So you could say that they're really close to nature and really close to being animals. Yeah. And they don't have a knowledge really of good and evil like we do. And again, it's not even
good and evil, but it's like,
Okay, so they don't have a knowledge of
malintent or
yeah, well, we could
potentially.
just say the concept of good and evil. That's a good, they don't have a knowledge of the concept of good and evil. So they'll just think that everything's happening because it's natural and that's how it's supposed to be. And this businessman is just naturally like this. Like, okay, we're just gonna go along with what he says. So when you eat from that fruit of good and evil, that's the moment when you eat the fruit. So maybe the fruit is the trauma, or the fruit of knowing good and evil is the fruit. Yeah, it's the fruit directly from the trauma. Like trauma is the tree. Maybe the tree is trauma. And then that fruit,
that's what caused the split in the psyche.
Yeah. We're just oversharing here, guys. We're not making claims.
Yeah, and we're just speculating.
Because that could, literally, maybe, I don't know, but you know what I'm saying, that they could be demarcating the point of where that happened in human consciousness. And if you were Yahweh in the garden, you're this protector of the garden, you don't want the animals, or you're going to warn them. And it's not that he didn't want it, but it is a warning. And it's when you warn them, you're giving them the free choice, like, and the warning, I think, was if you really want to go to this next stage, like you think you want this knowledge of good and evil, it comes with a fucking heavy price. You're going to have to start a podcast, it's crazy. No. So yeah, I think that could be maybe a good thing to look at there, like a little point where what could have happened. Maybe there's some clues there, we can look through Genesis and see if we can find anything else. Because maybe it wasn't just the creation of men and women, it's like the first age of whatever of our existence as beings. And then the next stage is when we get that awareness of really just individuality. And here we go with the division, right? So there's a Sharon and there's a Brandon, but is there really, or are we just part of mankind? Because I
feel like that's book Jesus Code is kind of talking about that.
Yeah.
It's like,
go ahead.
Saying like we are one, like we're all one, but then we've come to the place where some event happened and now we're individualized. We've been broken apart into pieces and we've forgotten, what our true nature was.
Yeah. And I think that if it's part of the cycle, because I think that to get to the next level, we have to split and look at each other as individuals and then reconcile that and then get a different perspective, because then we won't be as naive, but we'll still come back to that understanding. It's like the fucking cycle, right? So we'll get back to right where we were, but then we'll still have that perspective. So then we could be stronger for whatever's next. We won't get taken off the farm. We won't get taken off the garden so easily next time. I just said farm because,
Well, the bush.
Yeah.
Like the Bushman.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what I'm saying. We won't get taken out of the Garden of Eden so easily. We'll have that perspective so we could truly enjoy it. And we don't need a higher being to look out for us. We can look out for ourselves. And that doesn't mean like to scorn God or the creator, but it's like, then he could go on.
No, but that's how God or the creator, that's how the creator created us. Mm-hmm. We save ourselves. We figure things out. He gave us that kind of a brain, and everything.
In the former age, I feel with the intuition thing, it was more the God, because I think the God was part of the collective of the creator, the consciousness.
Yeah.
It was all just his consciousness, basically.
Yeah. And some people, and some people say, are we living in the mind of God? I mean, I've heard that the last couple of years as a like throwing it out there type of concept. And it's an interesting concept.
We're humans 2.0. We got the upgrade and we're just trying to figure it out. It's like, oh, dude, and we're just fighting. And it's like AI trying to come, even though I don't think what they say, but so it's a growing pain. So literally we're going through growing pains, and the people who are managing it or think they're managing it, like these quote unquote influencers and controllers or whatever, they're just part of it too. They're just doing their role,
Yeah. So there's this concept of, and I don't know how to pronounce it because I didn't really look it up, but
Watigo.
yeah, that. Can you talk about that a little? Because I only recently heard about it through like just as I was going through Owen Benjamin's channels on Telegram, I just saw people talking about it. I saw him kind of talk about it, but I wasn't really sure what it was all about. Because of course I grew up under a rock. So I didn't even never even heard that word before.
Because of Watigo, you never heard of Watigo. Well, I think the best way to describe it is, I believe it's a Native American term, and they used it to describe the other people that came, like the settlers,
Mm,
in their state of mind and their way of conducting themselves. It was a Watigo, and it was kind of like they looked at it, I think, like a disease, kind of, and a disease of the mind. And what it's really, I believe, when you let the ego get out of control.
okay.
So the way Owen Benjamin talked about it recently, he talked about it like an inner battle. He described the Watico as that voice inside that is trying to tempt you. You know, it's one that's like, oh, you don't have to go hiking today. You can, you know, it's like that one. I mean, you know, sometimes you need a break, but it's that one that's always, or it could be the one that's even talking shit, you know, that terrible master that's always like, oh, that was too bad, or, you know, you suck, or you shouldn't go do this, or you'll be terrible, you'll never be able to do that. All those voices, right? That's the Watico talking to, and that's the real spiritual battle, the battle within that you have to overcome. But externally,
Mm,
it's that's the internal, and then externally, it's witnessed as, you know, like think of the Native Americans, the story we're told, the settlers coming here, and they're just not living in accordance with nature the way that the settlers were. So they saw them as, I mean, I don't want to speak for all of them, but you can imagine if you're in those shoes, you know, you're hunting buffalo, living on the plain, and you're like, who are these fucking retards, right? So it's just a whole, like were, like I said, it's just the disease of the mind. They saw that the ego, we could put it in those terms, was running rampant in these people and just controlling their lives. The materialism was just overtaking them. You know, they wanted everything. And I'm not trying to condemn the pioneers and stuff, but it's like people want to own land, they want to own animals, and they want to
when there was no concept of that
yeah,
for them. It's just like the Bushmen. It's
exactly.
like, I wonder what the Bushmen were thinking. Were they thinking like these Native Americans were thinking? You know, for lack of a better term, because I don't, you know, Native
Yeah, maybe
peoples
they think
or,
it's like a disease.
yeah. Did they see that? Did they see that these people who were pushing them off their own like place to live, did they see them as ego driven? And did they see that these people had never had that experience of pushing their ego down? You know,
Yeah, it's quite
I
possible.
wonder. I
Maybe they
wonder.
didn't know how to react to it.
Right. It took them by surprise, probably for sure.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's a very interesting topic. But I guess the next topic that we were kind of going to segue into is kind of like what is the response to all of this, and like is the solution to, you know, because there are people out there in religious circles who will try to convert you to their particular viewpoint, and that's just woke raping, or maybe not even woke raping, but it's like, because you know it may
Well,
not
yeah, I
even
think
be
it is.
true, but it's just trying to convert you or convince you of something that is just someone else's opinion, and it's basically indoctrination. um, because I was telling Brandon this earlier. I can't remember who I was talking to, but I was trying to explain um, about the word knowing and the word believing and the word truth, or you know, all those words. And um, I just I go back to the Bible and think about, like, Adam knew his wife. Well, how did he know her? What is it to really know? Can you believe something without truly knowing? And what is truly knowing? Truly knowing is experience. It's experiencing something. So when Adam knew his wife, he experienced her. And Brandon said, "How dare you?"
No, I said, yeah, he did.
Oh, okay. That's what you said. But so you can't have a belief that is blind in something. You can't just be like, well, I believe it, if you've only just been indoctrinated in it. You have to have some level of experience with something that you're going to say you believe, and something that you know. You can't know without experience. And that is, I guess I don't know why. I can't remember why I brought that up.
And that's why we're in this whole, could it be that's why we're in this whole crazy existence, and there has to be pedophiles and fucking bankers and shit, and people who get murdered.
Yes, because we have to know what that's like.
Do we have to know? Yeah. I think we could just end the show. There we go. We could just end the whole series. Just watch this episode, everybody. You get it? No. I think that speaking of Adam, I just want to say shout out to Adam Plasma Bear, because he got us these awesome freaking mugs. Thank you, dude. Yeah, exactly. And I think what you said is exactly right. And it kind of put a light bulb in my brain, because, so let's even take a step back further from like Christians, but think about us, right? All these things we're talking about, these concepts that we get, we're like, oh, wow, shit. Yeah. Oh my God. Now what's our
it makes common sense. So we think we get it,
Well, no, we do. We're starting to understand a lot of these things and things we talk about. And we're like, people watch the show, same thing. And they're like, wow, now I want to share this information with other people. Like, they're doing it wrong. And so this is really a message for all of us. Like, they're not doing it wrong. They have to experience that to get the knowing, to know, to get back around, to figure out for themselves in their own perspective, in their own way, and get to know it. So that's what I wanted to say. Go ahead.
I was just going to quickly say that brings compassion too, because you can just be like, oh, I can't stand that they just keep, like, they don't see it. They just don't see it. And they just keep, but then you have to have compassion. You have to remember they have to go through their journey.
Yeah, that's a really good, important point. And then in that way, you get the knowing as well. And now you know. And knowing is half the battle, as G.I. Joe says. So, yeah, I think that... what were we talking about?
I am sorry. Let me just segue into this real quick.
Yeah.
Because it's the reason I brought up the topic, is because I remember in that same episode with the Kalahari Bushman, Crow said something to the effect of that there's a difference between the knowing of spirituality, he said the word knowing, which to me is experience, and then the belief of religion to me, which is when you just believe something, you're just blindly believing it, because you can take it from somebody, indoctrination, like, oh, the church told me this. And so you can just blindly believe something without experience or without true knowing, true knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. And no, don't apologize. That was great. We said about compassion. And what I was going to say.
That's why I don't like cutting you off.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine, because it helped me with this too, and added to the show for sure. And your name's on the show. You don't have to apologize. I should be apologizing.
No, stop.
Yeah. So what were we talking about again? No. So with the Christians, I'm just kidding. So with the Christians, if somebody's coming to you and trying to convert you or condemning you and all this stuff, you just have to know that if you want to have compassion for them, you could always say, hey, they're trying to help me because they don't want me to burn in hell, because they want me to because they saw some truth and it helped them in their life. So they're trying to help me because they want me to see that truth. They just don't understand that I have a different perspective on the world. That's all,
Mm-hmm.
and they think that they're helping. So
Yeah.
again,
And that's hard sometimes because
oh yeah, because the
people can
pastor in
actually
hell,
be very condemning
oh yeah,
and like basically sending you to alleged hell, which I think
you two
hell
double
is really
chopsticks.
what you do with your life here, not a place that you go. What?
No, I was trying to
HE
talk
double
over you.
hockey sticks? Yeah,
I
yeah.
was trying to talk over you on purpose because I knew what you were going to say. I was just fucking with
Ah,
you. I was trying to edit you. I was joking. No, you're right. There really is. There's really no no evidence. Well, obviously, there's no evidence for any of this, but there's no like reference to hell in the Bible. I'll say there's the pit of fire in Revelations. I understand that, but that could be interpreted in different ways.
that's all allegorical, though, by the way.
Well, it could be.
Allegedly.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but it doesn't even refer to hell as I think that was more of a construct of when we're going to talk about this in a future upcoming episode when we talk about religion, but I think it was more of a concept of fear porn. But we'll talk about that later. I
Agreed.
could be, hey, listen, I could end up burning in
I
hell,
concur, but I could be wrong, but I concur at this moment.
Yeah. So, but again, that doesn't mean you should throw out the baby with the bathwater, and then you can have compassion for Christians in that way and just know that they're on their journey. And again, if they condemn you and they say things about you, does it really matter at the end of the day? That's just their perception.
Right. It doesn't, but it just kind of puts a difficult situation between you and that person,
Oh yeah, for sure. And you could put
hard
up
to mend
boundaries if you have
sometimes.
to, if they can't understand that if it's a friend or a relative or someone close to you, you want to keep in your life. If they can't understand that, listen, we just don't talk about this stuff. That's all. Or, let's talk about
Right.
it and let's talk about the Bible. Sure. We could just read the Bible. How about we just read the Bible? Oh, that's great. We don't have to say anything. And then you could have some kind of communion. Cause I got to hang out with a born again Christian and he passed away last year. He was like in his 70s. It's somebody I've known throughout my whole life. It's my friend's, I guess you could say, stepfather. And he was super into the hardcore born again Christian thing. And then he kind of got disillusioned by the church, which I get it, but he was still fire and brimstone. But he would quote the Bible all the time. And when we got to hang out while I was in Florida, a lot of the stuff he said from the Bible made sense to me in a different way. And it helped me. So, and I wasn't trying to woke rape him at all about anything, He even like said something about Buddha. He's like, Buddha's burning in hell, or he said something like that. He thought I was like a Buddhist or something. I was like, yeah, probably. Fuck that guy. No. So yeah, and the path of Christ is a beautiful thing. So if somebody's even close to that, you can even think of it this way: the Christians, the churchians that you don't agree with, they're still preserving this message. They still preserved it allegedly for 2,000 years for us to now decode it on our own and see what it means for us. So if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't even have it. So, you can look at it that way.
Yeah, good point.
And there was a lot of like Thomas à Kempis. There was a lot of like what were they, like popes? No, monks. That's it. Even Catholic stuff. There's a lot of good interpretation in there. There's a lot of stuff that lines up. You could even say like the Bhagavad Gita, and I'm not saying that's the answer either, but I'm just saying there's a lot of people who got it and they put it out there because they knew they were high up and they played the game, but they didn't play it exactly the right way. And they let some of the secrets out for people in the future. They knew they were building for the future. They were in the present and they knew that people down the road, they saw things were a little crazy and they were burning people at the stake and all this stuff allegedly. So they had their own way to preserve the message for the future. And it's really a gift. So when you see a churchian, thank him because he's preserving this message for future generations.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the Bhagavad Gita because I was just listening to that this morning. I woke up quite early and I knew I wasn't going to go back to sleep. I just knew it. So I just, it was like 4 a.m. So I turned on my audiobook and I started listening to the Bhagavad Gita, which I was partway into. I think it was around chapter 10 or so. But this particular version has extra commentary, so it makes it a little bit longer. But as I was listening to that, and he was talking about, well, the book is mentioning certain things. There was quotes in there that I was like, that sounds exactly like what's written in the Bible. It's like multiple different quote religions have preserved these texts, and there's truth in all of them, and they actually say a lot of the same things. And so like I read the Bible a few times over, like the cover to cover thing in the last few years when I was I was going, okay, I'm going to learn about this stuff. Like I said I was going to do it when I was young. I never did it. I'm going to do it now. I did it. I read through the Bible like 3 times. So I know what it says. Like you can't, like, if you tell me, oh, there's a story that says this, I'll be like, I don't know. Or I'll say, you know what? Yeah, I remember that story. So there were things that, yeah, that's experience, because I actually read through the Bible. I was doing a lot of audiobook reading, but I would listen to it a lot. So some of these things were written in the Bhagavad Gita were like, dude, I know I heard that in the Bible. So it's very, very interesting. I guess
it goes along with that message of people in each time and place need a particular message, and it's set in its own story, and the same message is there. And that's why I feel like a lot of Westerners who are in this Christian thing, who get disillusioned with Christianity, they can maybe connect better because it's not as personal. It's not as like, they don't think about all the crazy experiences they had at church. You know, they could detach from that. And then the next step, I feel, for me was to get back into Christianity and all that stuff, because there's so much there. And then the roots of that and Hermeticism, and you know, it's a very, very deep, rich pool to gather from. And you know, that's why I was glad that I was steered back in that direction, because I was going pretty far with the Hinduism and stuff, which I'm not saying it's bad or whatever, but more for my culture, my knowing, it was just easier for me to download it. I'll say that's all. Like I listened to Bhagavad Gita a bunch of times, and then I listened to the Kabbalion, and I was like, oh, I get it right away, you know. So it's just put in more of a context. And then Christianity, same thing. Now when I read the Bible, I just get it so much. I'm like, oh, all right. It was kind of put in a context for people in our society, you know. And it could be used for all kinds of stuff. It's very, just like they say about occulted knowledge or hidden knowledge, it's very dangerous because it could be used to enslave people, control people. And really, they're just allowing themselves to be a slave. But the recipes are in there for all that stuff, or to live a great, natural, awesome existence, you know?
Yeah. Via nature, because allegedly, as Crow likes to say, there's no lie in nature. And the scripture actually, when I say that, I mean the Bible actually encodes a lot of the sky clock stuff in the verses. So it is according to nature, and always was.
Yeah, exactly. Do we have any more notes?
No.
Well, you know, we could talk about, because we could talk about division, and we didn't write this in the notes, but I brought up earlier was the whole trucker thing that's going on.
Oh, that's right. We did want
Yes.
to. Yeah.
I remembered. So I'm so proud of myself now. Yeah, so there's a strike going on in Canada, and it appears to be about rights and about people you know, demanding their rights from the government. Like, we're sick of all this stuff, which, you know, listen, if this happened, on March 3rd, March 11th of 2020, I would have fucking been the first one there, guys. When they try to shut everything down, for this pandemic, I would have been the first one there, if everybody showed up. Let's go.
If
right?
this trucker thing had happened back then, is that what you're saying?
If a trucker style protest event where people were like, no, we're not going to shut down. Yeah, let's go. Right. But I think that ship kind of sailed, and everyone's kind of fucking LARPing now. No. So I think that Owen Benjamin brought up a great point, and I'd like to share this on our show. And that is that if you're in the system, right, and you're dependent, like, hey, I'm using a computer, I'm eating food from the store, I get it. I mean, no, I did eat eggs today that were from a farm. So there we go. I'm getting there, but it's a journey, it's a step. But if you're in the system, then technically you're a slave. And I know it's really hard for people to hear that. And what I mean by that is that you have to go along with the system, because if they shut it off, you're a slave to it, right? So you could just say you're a slave to the grocery store or whatever it is. And so being a slave, if you're going to go to the government, they're the ones who are providing all this stuff. They're the top of the corporations and all this, allegedly, right? So if they're the ones who are quote unquote controlling this, you have two choices, I see, right? You could try to get off the system more, off the dependency anyway. Like, I guess you can't totally get away from the government. What are you going to do, right? You can move to the woods, whatever. But if you want to get off the dependency, you can move to become less of a slave or less dependent on the system. Therefore, you're less dependent on their whims. And really, at the end of the day, a lot of this stuff I see is choice anyway. I haven't worn a mask yet, for a minute when I was going to some guy's house, and it was like half on and whatever. It was like, I told the story before, but we've all had our confrontations on the show over the covering, and I haven't taken any experimental medical serums, allegedly. So, and I'm still traveling around the country. I'm still DJing weddings. Still, it hasn't hindered me. There's work out there. All I see right now is opportunity. There's so much work out there for people to do. So I'm just saying that there's ways to get away, right? But if you're gonna go to the government now to get more of your rights, that's kind of like going to the slave master. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this, right? I've been to gun protests and all this stuff. So, but now we got to think of in the context of the system, there's kind of two sides, right? There's the left-right paradigm. There's the people that go out and protest and do the Black Lives Matter, and they do the Women's March and all this stuff, would be the left. And then you have the right that goes out and do the gun protests, and they're the ones, they're probably doing the trucker thing, right? It's probably looked at as like a right-wing thing. And the way Owen broke it down, which really blew my mind, is he goes, when you're going to the slave master, the left, Women's March, they're going, we want to keep our abortions, we want to be able to work, we want all this stuff, we want equal rights. And they're kind of going along with the eugenics program. So the way he described it was, he's like, there's this giant group of slaves going to their slave masters going, we don't want 3 meals a day, we only want 2. So of course that system would back up those protests, because they are
wanting more slavery,
feeding into the eugenics program, they're feeding into not having children, whatever, they're feeding into that. So then of course they would demonize the side that is asking for more, because they're asking for more lollies and fancies or rights or whatever it is at the end of the day, which is going to be just, and I'm not judging them, of course, because I feel that way too, but it's going to be more of a strain on the system. It's harder for the system. They don't want you to have more guns. They don't want you, they want you to go with the mandates. But so that's kind of the context we see it, right? It's just like a slave revolt. The problem is, though, with the slave revolt is if you don't have a plan, so you're bluffing this thing, right? You're bluffing, we're going to shut everything down, we're going to take over the government. But what are you going to do if you do take over it? It just becomes a Marxist takeover at that point. Basically allegedly at the end of the day, it's kind of like it's a coup. And then there's other powers, I would imagine, waiting in the wings to take over that power. There's people that are worse than the government that want to come in. And if that's true, do you think that they could be funding that side if they have a lot of money and they have a lot of power and influence? So that's all I'm saying. You got to really be careful when you're getting involved in this stuff, because you don't know the people behind it. And yeah, it is a great organic movement. And again, like I said, if this happened on 3/11/2020, I would have been the first one there. But now I have a different perspective on the world. I saw how people acted, and I just think that you really got to be careful what you wish for, because you don't know the government. Yeah, you could look at police even and all stuff like highway police, and you could be like, oh, they're just like, they're brigands on the road. They're just shaking people down for money. Yeah, but guess what? They also stop the people who are more violent that would take more from you. So I'm not saying it's a evil, but it might be a necessary evil, like we said earlier, right? So that's what I wanted to say about that. And what do you have to add, Sharon?
Well, I found the notes. So we called it self-inflicted tyranny.
Oh yeah, sit.
Because you also wanted to bring up the Crow episode with Kalina Lux, which was Crow episode 384, Claiming and Walking One's Spiritual Path, about this woman who lives in Puerto Rico, who started a church. Very interesting story she had. But because of what she's done, the documentation that she provides the people who become members, the alleged authorities have to accept those terms because it's a religious exemption. But anyway, Brandon,
what Sharon means is like, so people, they were making a mandate that you had to take an experimental medical serum to do certain jobs. So she's offering exemptions that the government's accepting, because technically she's a church, even though it's more about, I guess you'd say, spirituality and stuff like that.
And sovereignty.
Sovereignty, yeah. But anyway, I just want to clarify, but go ahead.
Yeah, no. So you wanted to talk about how these people were bringing tyranny upon themselves, and with this whole policing themselves.
Yeah, so it's something she said kind of, I think in the beginning of the episode, where she was just, because Crow was asking her about what she saw in Puerto Rico and how they're responding to all this stuff, the mandates and all this crazy stuff. And she was saying how most people are just going along with it. So they have curfews and stuff, and they can't go out like past 5 o'clock on Sunday or something like that, or something silly. I don't remember what it is, but and then Crow's like, well, do they have the enforcement? Are the police doing anything? And he's like, no, the police really, they're just maybe stopping some people like on the highway or, silly things like that. But like, it's mostly the people just doing it to themselves. And this really goes back to the whole slave mentality, because they're allowing fear. They're allowing fear for the security, this false sense of security. So they're allowing their fear to overtake them. And it's something that's really dangerous that happens. And I think that it's a little different here in the United States, obviously, because we have this whole freedom roots. We have the American Revolution to look back on in that story. So I think it's a little different here. But again, we're so subject to our desires and the materialism and we need this and we need everything so easy that we're very easily subdued and subject to these things. So not everybody, but I feel that because we're so divided, that some people are going to choose it and some aren't, and we're just going to kind of keep going along. And I think that's the real point of this whole episode about division, is that if we really do want to move up as a species and elevate to the next level of psychological evolution, I guess you could say, like moving up as a society, that like in Star Trek, for example, they have different levels of societies, and they, they won't go to a planet. They won't interfere, kind of like we don't interfere with hunter-gatherers normally, except for the Bushmen, I guess, for some reason. That's Africa, though. It's crazy
They
over
wanted
there.
their land and resources is probably what they
Yeah.
wanted.
Oh, yeah. Africa's a little different. South America, they kind of usually leave them alone, I guess. I don't really know. I haven't been there. But anyway, so yeah, there's different levels. So if we kind of want to, people who look at the world and want it to change and they want to move to a place where it would be another golden age or whatever, I think we got to get over this division to get there, it seems to me. And that's why we're talking about it. And that's really the key to it is you're only divided because you choose to be. You don't have to agree with somebody. You could, like, we go back to last episode when we're talking about prioritizing people's
Characteristics and qualities.
character traits and their qualities and their beliefs and stuff. Like, so I think if we could find higher ground to unite, and throughout history it's been done through trauma, like wars and stuff will unite people, like 9/11, dude. For people who are younger that are watching this, after 9/11, I remember in Connecticut, which is like, dude, I just got back from a trip where I drove to South Carolina, Alabama, all the way through the states to Colorado, down to Arizona, all the way to New Mexico, Texas, all these places, went to Florida. Everybody was so nice. And I come back to Connecticut and people were just terrible. But anyway.
Terrible.
Well, I haven't interacted with anyone yet, but I was just even talking about because they went away and they were in upstate New York and they're like, everyone was so nice. And I'm like, yeah, I was like, everyone's everywhere and everyone was nice. I'm like, just Connecticut, people are just the worst.
That's so weird.
But yeah, be better, Connecticut. Come on. No, the people I know.
Connecticut.
I know they're
not connected.
There's a lot of great people in Connecticut. I'm not trying to say everybody, but there's just
disconnected.
Yeah, it gets weird. So and I don't even mean over the mandate stuff. I just mean people are just fucking awkward and rude. But it's cool. Yeah, so I think if we could get to that.
Agree to disagree.
Yeah. Yeah, and that would be the next step. And then after that, who knows? But that's why we're talking about this, because I think if we put it out there, maybe it'll be one step closer to happening. Who knows? Could it be? We demand it, universe.
At least awareness, putting it out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus it makes for interesting podcast episode. I think this might be one of our best yet, man. We really nailed this one, huh? If I do say so.
If you do say so yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. I liked it. I liked last week's too. I think that was it. There were a couple other things, but we'll talk about those.
Yeah, so I think we could kind of talk about what we're going to talk about next week for a minute. Why not? That'd be fun. A little spoiler. So we have an idea, guys. We're not exactly sure. Maybe you can give us ideas below in the chat or even comment on this video if it's before next week. Or even if it's not, just comment. Let us know. We'll talk about it. We want to talk about cosmology. Next episode's probably going to be 12, allegedly. So we want to talk about cosmology, religion, spirituality, astrology, tarot, stuff like that. All that kind of stuff. And we want to talk about the good and the bad, because that's what we do. We address both sides. So we could talk about some about the religion control systems that exist within organized religion that we've touched on before. Maybe we can even bring up what Mark Passio said in some of his epic presentations that he's done. Man, can you imagine just standing up there for 4 hours and talking? That guy is fucking, no matter what you say about him, listen, that guy,
he's awesome.
He's a wizard slayer for sure, like an evil wizard, because I'm a good one. So you could try to slay me. It's cool. But no, yeah, so we're going to talk about stuff like that, and I'm pretty excited about it. So let us know what you guys think. If there's any topics you want us to talk about and cover, and we will do that. We should definitely talk about the apocryphal texts, or like the lost books, like the Book of Thomas and stuff like that. That'd be cool.
Cool.
That kind of bridges the gap, you know.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Sounds good.
any thoughts you have on the next upcoming episode? Anything you're excited to talk about? I'm making a riff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we'll probably touch on the topic of worship.
Yeah. There you go.
Right.
I like it. Maybe we should look at the etymology of the word.
Maybe etymology.
The entomology. Too much Lord of the Rings. That's a good Freudian slip, though. I like that.
What is entomology again?
I don't know. I was just saying ent because the ent is a creature.
Oh, the ents. That's right.
The ents are going to war. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you guys in the chat. It's good to get to know some of you guys in person. It's been really awesome. It really changed my perspective on humanity overall. I was telling this to Adam's wife when I was down in South Carolina most recently. I was there 3 times. That's pretty crazy.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. On the way to Sedona, stopped there. On the way back, I stopped there and went to Florida and Georgia and stuff. And then on the way back. So 3 times. Thank you guys so much for housing me, feeding me. And he put me to work this last time, which is great. We put up some fence posts and stuff. It was awesome. I loved it. It was like, he was even saying, he's like, oh man, it's great. It's like hanging out, but you get shit done. I'm like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, we just talked about gravy the whole time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing. So yeah, it really changed my perspective on things. Thank you guys so much. It was very healing. And thank you to everybody in the chat. I mean, I got to meet Librarian Bear, which is great too. Philip, I got to meet him. He's awesome. He made this great staff. It's over there. I had to take it in here so I could sleep with it. I don't mean fuck it, guys. I mean sleep next to it. Jesus, get your mind out of the gutter. And then Spoons, I've met her before, but she's awesome. And then obviously Jeremiah and Cass and Devin and Sharon and Michelle. So yeah, thank you guys so much. I had an epic.
And on your way up from South Carolina.
Yeah, Philadelphia Bear. How can I forget? Out in PA. Dude.
With your Mark Passio accent.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a couple minutes. I'll tell a crazy good story. So Philadelphia Bear allegedly lives on the top of a mountain in Virginia. It's like a legit mountain. So I had to drive up this crazy road, and I have a 4-wheel drive, thank God, because it snowed. They plow the road really well though. So the road is plowed, but he's like in a way secluded area. So it's not plowed, and his car got stuck and had to get towed out. So he jumped in my truck and we drove down the road, no problem. But then when we got to his driveway, it was very scary looking. So I'm like, you know what? Let's walk down to the house and I'll check it out. And, I had my cats with me and stuff. So it would have been a lot easier for me to get my truck down the driveway. So we get down there. I'm like, you know what? It could do it. So I pulled all the way down, no problem. And I said to myself, you know what? If I get stuck, I'll just stay another day. It'll melt. I'm not going to worry about this at all. I'm just going to, like you said, let source do it. Let it go to, let go, let God. So in the morning we got up early and he wanted to go to work, and he actually even let me crash there, like stay there longer. He's like, yeah, stay however longer you want, whatever. So I gave him a ride out to his car, and I had to back out into a sketchy situation, and then I drove up, and it like toward the end I was in 4 high and I had to stop and put it into 4-wheel low, and I just right up it. It was awesome. And then we were going down, and it had flurried that night, so there's about 1 inch of snow, and it hadn't been plowed. So we're going down all those scary roads. He had his car in front of me, but I had this heavy truck, but it was fine. It was actually a really cool experience. I felt like I was on a roller coaster at some points. So yeah, man, shout out to Philadelphia Bear. He's awesome, dude. Just opened up his house to me, and we had an epic conversation. Yeah, I think it's really healing. If you're somebody who's watching this and you have, go out and meet people, meet bears, if that's your thing or whatever. Because yeah, they're really good people, and you could just open up and talk about all kinds of different subjects, and they're really open-minded from what I've seen. So
yeah, I went to a bear adjacent activity this past weekend, a flat earth meetup.
Oh yeah. How
Yeah.
was
And
that?
I noticed a guy coming in and I saw his allegedly shirt and I was like, yes. Because I couldn't like it was funny because the people who were doing the flat earth thing, I didn't know who they were. I didn't know anything about them because I just got a message on the Flat Earth Clock app, David Weiss's app. And it was just kind of like, hey, we're meeting here at this day, at this time, be there or be square. And I was like, okay. So I went, I took a friend and we, we get there and we're kind of like, we're like, where are they? Like, because this place was really big and it's outdoor and stuff. So we see some globe balloons and we're like, that's gotta be them. But then as I got closer, one of the dudes had a t-shirt that had like a globe on it. And I was like, maybe that's not them. So like I turn around and as I turn around, I'm walking toward the entrance again. I see the allegedly shirt. I'm like, yes, I know at least someone.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then we found our way over and my friend, she was like, you know what? I'm just going to go ask them. So she went over there and she's like, are you guys part of the, cause she's been a non-glober, I should say, for probably longer than I have. So she went over and said, and they're like, yeah, we are. So yeah, we had a good time. It was fun. Good times.
Yeah, that's what I love about if you see somebody with an allegedly shirt, because you automatically know that they get it. It's just like it's like a code. It's like a secret brotherhood, if you will, sisterhood too. And that's why I'm really appreciative of the bears in here, because sometimes we talk about things that might not exactly agree with everyone's cosmology, but I don't say that they're wrong. Like people that believe more in the Christian churchy or whatever it is, even if they're not churchy and that thing, more of the literal stuff. Who am I to say that they're wrong? Because from their perspective, they're right. So, and they get it. And there's higher ground there. There's other things that they get that they're good
that you
people
might
to be
not
around.
get.
They'll open their house. I'll open their house to them. I know I could depend on them and stuff like that. That really matters. So I don't really care about the Trinity and stuff like this. Yeah, we could talk about it and have a conversation, but I'm not going to base my friendship on that, So that's why I'm really appreciative of everybody who watches, even if they don't agree with me. Thank you. That's even better.
Yeah.
Because if they agree with you, it's easier to watch. It's harder for people to watch that don't agree. So I appreciate that. Thank you. But you're going to hell. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I just want to say I remembered the guy's name. He's Drum Cat Bear. The one with the one with the allegedly shirt on. Yeah. So just shout out to Drum Cat Bear and maybe I'll send him the link if he wants.
I got my Beartaria shirt on.
Sweet.
Let's see if we get yeah, so
6:55 for me.
All right, good time to end it. Hey Sharon, what do we say to good people?
That if you're not oversharing,
then you're totally not caring. Good night, everybody.